You're listening to Did You Mean Riddle Me This?
Good morning, Ruddle Maniacs. Happy Monday to you. Your friend the Ruddler is back, Taylor Ruddle. And today's podcast is a very exciting one for me to release because this is exactly the sort of content that I got into making podcasts to do. See, I've never really been a big sports person. I like the idea of following a sport, but I was never really raised to watch any particular sport. My parents were mad about rugby and netball, but neither of those really resonated with me. It seemed like it was the kind of thing that people just supported the Crusaders just because that's what you did. And for the longest time, I've always wanted to do a podcast where I bring an expert in something onto the podcast, and then me, as a relative layman with very little knowledge in the subject, gets to pick their brain and find out all the questions I've had about this particular topic. So you can imagine I felt very lucky to know Big Jimmy Small. He is a fellow stand-up comedian and a very good friend of mine. I've known Jimmy for, going on 3 or 4 years now. He's one of my favourite comedians to watch in Christchurch and, to be honest, even the whole of New Zealand. He's a very, very funny guy with some really creative premises. So the topic of today's interview is going to be football. Now, you're probably out there wondering, which football is he talking about? And this is exactly the sort of confusion that led to me not knowing which football Jimmy played while coached for the longest time. We'd run into each other before a show, and I'd ask him how his evening was, and he would say he just got finished coaching football. And for the longest time, I thought he was coaching rugby, because in New Zealand a lot of people refer to rugby as footy or football. But as it turns out, he was referring to British football or soccer to any American listeners out there. To be honest with you, I called it soccer too. I was very, very careful in this interview not to refer to it as soccer to Jimmy's face, lest he fly into a rage and, leap across the room. I've recently got into the TV show Ted Lasso, and so naturally my interest in football began to be peaked. I think it's peaked. My interest in football was peaked. But the only thing, I've tried to watch some games on YouTube, but I don't really know what to watch for. And we get into this a little bit in the interview. The tricky part for me for getting into sports is I don't know how to tell who's good at this sport and who's not, and I don't know what to look for when it comes to a talented athlete. So I brought Jimmy over to my house, and we put a game of football on the TV that we very rarely referred to. I have put the link to the game that we were watching down in the comments, but if I'm going to be honest with you, probably a waste of time to have that going at the same time. We only referred to it 2 or 3 times. Most of the conversation actually ended up being about the culture and the business side of football, how ingrained in these communities a football club is, which I found super fascinating to learn about. I am really into the learning about the business side behind running a football club, I guess, if you will. So if that kind of thing is of interest to you, definitely listen on. But to be honest with you, while I was editing the interview, I ended up getting carried away and just enjoying hearing Jimmy talk about football. It's honestly a great interview. I am definitely going to listen to it back myself a couple of times, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm pretty sure you will. Jimmy is a very knowledgeable guy about football, and he's clearly really passionate about it. And I just did my best not to get in his way and let him go off about football. Oh, and quickly before we start the interview, if you want to see what Big Jimmy Small looks like, you can check out my comedy special, All My COVID Jokes, on YouTube, in which towards the end of this, Jimmy actually comes on stage and helps me for a segment where I needed a volunteer to demonstrate something. So search up Taylor Ruddle Comedy on YouTube if you want to check that out, and give my special a thumbs up and a comment, or whatever you're supposed to do to help the algorithm. Help me out here. Anyway, let's get into the interview. Hope you enjoy it. Here is Big Jimmy Small. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Taylor.
How are you doing, man?
I'm good. Really happy to be here.
Me too. I've been wanting to do something with you again ever since that one we did in what was Sunnio at the time.
That's
but
right.
Now is called
Vision Friends.
There you go. Check that out on Lincoln Road if you're ever in the area. So today we're going to be talking about football, which I understand you have a vested interest in.
Yeah, a lifelong passion from young age and mostly amateur, but yeah, hopefully I've got a few insights.
You were a player yourself.
Yeah, I would still be playing now if my arthritic knee allowed me.
Oh yeah, I can understand that. But you've taken to coaching, and when did you make that decision?
I have been coaching on and off for first time I coached. Well, I coached juniors when I was 40 years ago. We won under 12 Premier League in Christchurch.
Nice.
Did seniors first time 30 years ago, and been off and on coaching seniors. Every now and again I go, I want to coach, and then I just want to play.
By seniors you mean like high school and stuff?
No, open grade.
Top.
The top Christchurch that have gained. Yeah.
What is your team called?
This year I'm coaching Western AFC.
Oh, cool.
In its 111th season.
Nice.
Won the Chatham Cup 4 times back in the kind of 50s era. So one of the old clubs of Christchurch.
Yeah, 111, that's years in one season. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So that's been going on for quite a minute. And how is the season underway at the moment, or it's just getting started?
Yeah, no,
soon?
we've been going a while. It's been a difficult year. Haven't started really from scratch.
You had to start from scratch?
Yeah.
So what happens it's amateur football. Most of the people would be doing a day job as well.
Yeah, it's officially amateur in New Zealand so that clubs can access lottery grants.
Oh, that makes sense.
So there's definitely clubs that have got more money and they allocate generous expenses to players.
Yeah.
But that's not really our club.
Yeah, you're the little club that could kind of vibe. I guess we're getting into it quite quickly, but I'll give a little bit of background to the listeners. So I really don't know anything about football. All of my knowledge is taken from me just having watched seasons 1 through 3 of Ted Lasso, and I got quite to an outsider's point of view, it seems like that show captures the heart of why people enjoy football. And so I've known Jim was coaching football for ages, and I thought this could be a good chance to do this podcast idea I've had where me, as a not really following mainstream sports person, could talk to people that know about these sports and find out why they love them and how to tell for the casual viewer what to look for when you're watching these. Because I've been watching professional wrestling for a long time, and I've been watching stand-up comedy for a long time, so I can watch people doing those and have a pretty good idea of whether they know what they're doing or not. But watching football or rugby or basketball, I have no idea who's doing well and who's not. The only thing I kind of know is the scoreboard, and I'm sure there's a lot more to the game than that. So I thought, let's get Jim on, and what we are going to do is we're going to put on a game on the TV in front of us now. We are watching.
We're playing, Manchester City versus Arsenal in the 4th round of it will be the FA Cup.
Yeah, the Emirates FA Cup.
Yeah.
So I'll put a link to this in the video description and the show notes. You can watch it up on YouTube, and we're going to push play now. So we are going to do a kind of running commentary, and I'm going to ask Jim, because Jim was telling me a little bit before the show about the business behind how the clubs operate and all the leagues, and I just found that super fascinating. So
with Manchester City, you've got actually the geopolitical as well, because Manchester City were bought by significant interest from Abu Dhabi, and they were kind of the first significant purchase for the purpose of soft power.
Yep.
Manchester City are looking to basically build the first global network of clubs, all cities. So there's Melbourne City, there's New York City, they own, I don't know, probably close to 10 clubs around the world, and they are sort of using management techniques to join them up. So they can transfer players between them, they can develop players in different things. So that's a new strategy. They seem to be doing it very well, and Manchester City is obviously the pinnacle of that.
So they are almost they're setting up like a franchise around the world. So if they wanted to get a young player to have a little bit of experience overseas, they could just send him to any one of their clubs and they would play for a couple of years and then come back.
Equally, they're harvesting. So a US player might make it into New York City team, and then they would be in the system.
And how's it being received by the rest of... Because it sounds like, just from what you were telling me before, that sometimes when people try to change the institution of football, it's met with pushback due to traditionalism and things like that. How is that being received by the other teams?
Well, this slipped through really without people quite realising what was happening. There's been more awareness of the soft power element.
Right.
Yeah, this has kind of developed slowly, and basically, I guess there's two sides of it. People go, yeah, look at all this money changing the sport, but shit, they're good. You're like, they play such good football.
Yeah, okay. Because they're they're one of the teams that I hear people mention the most that are into football.
Yeah.
And then Arsenal is another one. Are they Welsh?
No, Arsenal's one of the London clubs, one of the big London clubs. Chelsea, Spurs, Arsenal, the big London clubs, and then you've got a number of smaller London clubs.
And with Arsenal being so, like, is there an undisputed top dog in the London clubs?
No. Over time, Arsenal would have been the more successful, but since the turn of the century, Chelsea have had more success. They had Abramovich come in and throw a lot of money at that, and they bought a lot of good players, and they won a lot of stuff. So
you were telling me before something that I found really, really fascinating is the idea of, well, I guess we'll break into the Premier League. What's the league below? It's like Championship League below Premier.
It is called the Championship. So theoretically, the four leagues below the Premier League are administered by the England FA. Within the EFL structure.
That's Football Association.
Yeah, and then like in the early 90s, what was the first division of that broke away and made their own league called the Premier League, and they got a great deal with Rupert Murdoch's Sky Sports and levered that money to basically supercharge that league.
Because you were telling me the difference in money between the Championship League and the Premier League is huge, right?
Yeah.
And what about the differences between the other leagues? Are they a little bit similar to each other?
They are closer. There's the biggest chasm would be between the Premier League and the Championship, but it does progressively go down.
And you were telling me one thing that made me laugh is that you were telling me about how Germany, they have the 51-50. Can you explain that?
Right, so there's different rules in different countries, but in Germany there's the 50+1 rule, which means that a club has got to be majority owned by the fans, basically.
Yeah.
So you can't have some chancer coming in.
Chancer's a great word.
Wide boy coming in and buying a club because either they have a lot of money or they simply say they have a lot of money. Which is often the case. Definitely, with the lower leagues that are strapped for cash, you've got someone come in and they say, "Oh yeah, no, I've got £5 million. It's just over there. It's just about to come in.
Just waiting for the check to clear.
Just waiting for the check to clear. Meanwhile, they buy the club and then they buy all these players because they want to get into the league higher.
Yeah. And
then it turns out that they don't know how to run a football club. The money's not there.
Yeah.
And there's been clubs that have gone into liquidation as a result. Like
I can imagine.
Bury, 100+ year history is in liquidation because some guys can come in. They're trying to put a stop to that. They've got this kind of test to see whether the owner is valid or not.
Yeah. And so when it goes into liquidation, can another person...
Yeah, well, see, you can liquidate the entity that was around for 100 years, but you've still got the community.
Exactly, yeah.
And what happens then is the community say, well, we can't not have a football club.
Exactly,
That is our lives.
Yeah.
So then they start off, like Wimbledon was a classic where Wimbledon got bought by, it might have been some Irish people. Anyway, they decided Wimbledon's in a location in London that's just too competitive. We think we're going to do better in Milton Keynes.
Oh, okay. So
they shifted the club to Milton Keynes.
They could become like a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah, they became the MK Dons, and their Wimbledon fans said, "But what the fuck is our club?" So they started their own club called AFC Wimbledon.
Nice.
And like 10 or 15 or 20 years later, they worked their way up from the very bottom.
Wow.
And they ended up playing in the same league as MK Dons. So Wimbledon played Wimbledon occasionally.
Wow.
Yeah.
The one thing I always find quite interesting, this is from the designer standpoint, is you look at the American like NFL teams, and all of the logos are like a fierce animal, or like, the Thunderbolts, or they've got all these. It's very bombastic, and they have these big muscular jacked animals as the logos. But the logos for the what I've seen of football teams are usually more like a royal crest kind of look.
Well, it's basically, I think, from where they date from.
Yeah.
Because they date from the NFL's relatively
that's true. Yeah.
recent institution, and it's been done with the mindset of marketing to modern media.
Yeah.
Whereas this is just grown out of
it's a lot longer
World War One sort of history. Where
And I guess we should talk a little bit about what we're seeing on the screen now. So we're watching.
So City in the light blue. So the other interesting thing about City is that they were kind of like, there's Manchester City and there's Manchester United, and Manchester United is possibly the biggest club in the world.
It's definitely the one I hear the most. United,
But within Manchester, more people support City than Manchester United. It's Manchester United more of a global brand.
Yeah.
But Mancunians tend to be more City.
So possibly you could say that United is like the mainstream comedian, and then Man City is like the Stuart Lee or the Dave Attell or something. They were,
but now they're supercharged and they've surpassed Manchester United in terms of playing, in terms of what they're winning and the football they're playing. So Manchester City are coached by Pep Guardiola, and he is the best manager in the world.
Really?
For the last.
Oh, we just saw what was that kick called?
That was the bicycle kick. By Erling Haaland, who's
someone just got taken out. His feet got swept.
Yeah,
that was an illegal move, I presume.
Yeah, that's right. That's a tactical foul. We're just seeing a replay of Haaland. He's big. He's super fast, and he's a deadly finisher, and he's also quite intelligent, and he's young, and he's just come to City this year, and it's a bit of a weird one because Pep basically is successful by kind of having 10 midfielders. Pep was a midfielder.
Yeah.
And so he sees things in triangles and interpassing.
Yeah. And
he wants to wear people down, basically play in small spaces and just dominate possession in the Spanish sort of style. But it's actually from Cruyff he really learnt his stuff from.
We'll just pause you there because just to make sure I have everything, and maybe for the listeners. So in football you have 3 different positions, right? There's strikers, defenders, and then, broadly speaking, let's say, and then midfielders. And the midfielders are the ones that need really good cardio, right? They've got to run everywhere.
They tend to run more. They do. They'll probably be running about 13 Ks in a match, a midfielder.
Wow, yeah.
And a lot of it's at top speed.
Yeah.
So that's right. But so Pep will convert midfielders to defenders.
So they
because he wants his defenders to be able to play football as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then also, for a long time, he abandoned strikers like the notion of a false nine. So in old school stuff, you had a big target man, a number 9 centre forward. You loop the ball high up to him. He'd win a header, and you'd play through him. He'd be a target man, old school target man.
Well, so he'd be like Jordan in basketball. You just want to get the ball to him, and then he
just
would
set him up, and he'd score the goals.
Gotcha.
But then, so Pep had Messi in his prime at Barcelona, and he played Messi as a false number 9. So he was notionally the centre forward, but he'd tend to just drop into midfield and leave a space where the centre backs want to defend someone. They've got no one to defend, and then they've got a swarm of midfielders coming at them, passing all around them, and then Messi still pops up and scores, but he's not doing it from the classic centre forward position.
So the idea of a striker is they would just kick it from quite far back. Is that why they were? Is that what they would do, or would they try and get as close to the goal as possible?
It was. So the centre forward, the role of the centre forward, the traditional number 9, was one of his roles was to be the target for an out ball. So rather than have to play through the midfield where there's all this jeopardy, the centre backs would lump it 40 yards up the pitch, and the centre forward would do enough that they can get possession up there, and then you're in the attacking third and you're a threat.
So the number 9 wouldn't be in the muck with everyone; he would be ahead of them, and then they would be trying to get it to him.
He would play higher up. Than most others. Yeah.
Are there any other traditional numbers or positions that are a thing in football?
Well, numbers, numbers is a language now, as it didn't used to be. Like you would tend to say a 6 is a holding midfielder, and a 10. 10. You know, my handle was you might have seen it, inside left.
Yeah.
So in the 60s. The number 10 was the inside left, where they actually had 5 forwards. They had the centre forward, number 9, and left of him was the number 10, and right of him was the number 8.
Gotcha.
And the 10, just something about that position became what they called the playmaker. So the most influential, so the people that could make the difference between possession and a goal-scoring chance were the playmakers, the people that could do the final pass to score the goal, and they tended to be the inside left setting up the number 9.
Gotcha.
And so number 10 is known as a position, and it would be playmaker number 10. But now they don't play in that formation, but still if you're the playmaker, if you think you're the guy that's going to make the difference in the attacking, you're going to want the number 10 on your shirt.
Okay, that's really interesting. So they would almost be like working in tandem. The 9 and the 10 would be like...
but the 10 is linking up, so he's a midfielder as well.
Yeah.
So he's basically orchestrating it more than the number 9 is. Yeah.
I see. And then is there a typical position that the captain plays?
No, they can play... goalkeepers can be captains. Captains more about... just mana, just about. Yeah, and performance. It's definitely nothing. You're not making those decisions on field the way a rugby captain would or a cricket captain would.
Yeah.
For
any international listeners, mana is the Māori word for like authority, kind of, isn't it? It's intangible leadership, charisma. Sort of, I apologise if I'm getting that wrong, but that's kind of the vibe. We all know it, what it means, but we don't really know how to articulate. I mean, I'm sure people do, but I don't. So we are 14 minutes into the game now, and they're still 0-0. Is this typical for a Premier League game?
This is FA Cup. A cup game means you can't have a draw. Basically.
Oh, so you have to play.
Well, actually, in the FA Cup, in the early rounds, you can have a draw, and you then have a replay of this game to get a result. But cup games is generally knockout. So you might play, if you end of 90 minutes, it's a draw, then you play extra time. And if you draw after extra time, you go to penalties. So that's when you happen, like the World Cup is knockout. It's not a league.
You can't have a draw on the World Cup. So the FA Cup, is that once a year?
Yeah, and that's Premier League teams. It's all those 4 divisions below, and also down to the 8th, 9th tier of English football will all enter the FA Cup. Some of them will play early rounds; they'll drop out. So you've got the 4th round. You've got 2 Premier League teams playing, and these are 2 of the better performing. Well, this is number 1 and 2 in the Premier League this year, playing each other in the cup.
Yeah.
And they do want to win the FA Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any kind of money bonus, or is it just prestige for being the FA Cup holder?
It's the money is not about the prize money. It's about the other
clout.
intangibles.
Yeah. And so, I remember you were telling me just before we turned on the mics, that so these are all English teams playing in the FA Cup. Is that right?
That's right.
For example, like Manchester City, would they ever play a team from Germany or Italy or Spain?
Right, so that's the European Cup competition. So there's a number of, and those are the most prestigious. So the Champions League is played as a cup competition each year over the course of the season from the placings in the domestic leagues the year before. So the top 4 teams in the Premier League get to play in the Champions League the following year.
And that's different from the Championship League, which is...
Okay. Championship is English.
Yeah.
Champions League is top tier. That's where everybody wants to get to. They want to play in the Champions League because that's the biggest prestige. It's the top clubs playing each other from all over Europe. So
I see.
Bayern Munich, Juve, Real Madrid, Barcelona, they're all there.
Gotcha.
Or they're trying to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a team in the Champions League who are, I don't know, like the Yankees, like they're the top?
There is. There's Real Madrid.
I've heard the name a lot.
Yeah. So before the Champions League, it was called the European Cup.
Yeah.
And that was started maybe 1960, the very early 60s. And Real Madrid was strong at the time, and they took it seriously, and they won a handful to start with, and they became very attached to it. It was a big part of Real Madrid's mystique was that they had won the European Cup these times, and there's something now that they've won something like 5 of the last 8 Champions League, which is disproportionate to their actual playing strength. It's just that psychologically, when it comes to the Champions League, there's something extra. When they come to the Bernabeu in Real Madrid, in Madrid, there's an expectation.
Yeah.
In the last few years, they have done some of the most amazing comebacks. You just sort of like, look, they're out, they're gone, and then suddenly over 3 minutes, they've scored 3 goals, and suddenly it's them again. You just can't count them out.
Yeah.
So there's this psychological mystique about them that they're very hard to put out, especially over this last bit.
That's a little bit like there is a professional wrestler called The Undertaker, and they used to always say that The Undertaker at WrestleMania was like, that was a different Undertaker, and
right.
And so
the rest of it, he's just playing around. But when it's
but when it's WrestleMania, he's the Undertaker at WrestleMania. So that was Real Madrid at the Champions League. They are like they play like they don't normally play.
Yeah. There's just something else. There's an energy and a belief.
Yeah.
There's a belief in the players.
Yeah.
That they could be suffering, they could be down 2, but they still think we're Real Madrid.
Yeah. This is our.
Yeah.
We're like almost having a home game, even though we're.
Yeah.
I remember hearing a thing about playing against the New York Yankees. It's something to do with the pinstripes that is like intimidating or distracting or something like that, and I think probably more from their reputation than anything else is what people found so intimidating. Real
Madrid is in all white. They look quite. Their strip is all white.
Oh, okay.
Which is
well, that was another thing.
Not too many others look like that.
No. I was going to ask as well, like I've been from Ted Lasso, it looks like the Richmond, they've got about 4 different kits that they wear that are all different colours. How many colours does a team tend to have?
They would probably have 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Because they would have a home strip. So Manchester City is in their home strip here. This is their main strip.
That's the red. No, sorry, that's the
light blue,
light
white
blue, yeah.
shorts. And Arsenal are in their main strip because it doesn't clash with the blue.
Yeah.
But if they were playing a clashing one, then the away team would be wearing one of their away strips.
I quite like that. It's almost like you have to coordinate your outfits with your opponents. You have to
Yeah.
make sure we're not.
Oh yeah.
We don't want to get confused.
Yeah, the referees take great joy in sort of, oh, that's a bit close. Oh no, you might.
Oh, so they sit
Well,
there like
that's one of their jobs. One of their jobs is make sure that the shirts don't clash.
So would they have 2 players standing in front of them, and they'd be like, "Oh, I don't know, bud, like this."
Well, let's not get into Christchurch football referees.
Gotcha. Okay,
yeah.
that's a whole different kettle
Yeah.
of fish. So we're now about 21 minutes in.
And so there's still no score, but
Yeah.
it's still an absorbing game because there's a number of things going on, and it differs here from basketball. If we'd been watching a game of basketball for 21 minutes,
They would be up to 200 points.
yeah, there'd be so many goal baskets, and you'd be going, is that one significant? Does that one matter?
Yeah.
Does that? I don't. What about that one? Does that? They all become meaningless.
Exactly.
Whereas a goal here would be significant.
Well, that was what I was going to say. One of my theories as to why people love football so much is because the goals mean so much, and players will have their celebrations they do. Like, what was it? It was who was the player that used to sort of jump into the air and do like a spin when he?
Oh, Ronaldo.
Or was that Ronaldo? Yeah.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember someone trying to explain that to me. But you see them do the big running slide on the knees.
Yeah, they have trademark celebrations. Yeah, that's true.
And the whole crowd scream goal when it goes in and everything. And
the energy at that point is
it's wild.
Yeah.
And the chants, but the football seems to have the most creative chants out of any sport that I've seen, apart from maybe professional wrestling, although professional wrestling is the chants, you could argue, are pretty played out by this point. Like, it seems like the English ones are quite
well, the
interesting and diverse.
fans do work at them. They can create new ones. They'll use, basically find an old tune. There's some standard tunes that they'll put different words to. I was so I'm a Leicester City
That's
fan.
your team?
Yeah, and they had they are the biggest sports story of this century when they won the Premier League in 2016.
What was was it they just like a...
well, they were 5,000 to 1 odds.
Wow.
In a 20-team league, they were 5,000 to 1 to win it.
And they won
because they'd only just avoided relegation the year before.
Gotcha.
But they just caught fire. The magic came together. And I was in Leicester at the time of their coronation when they finally won.
Really?
And the chants there. So they had some good ones. One was So when they won the league, they were still chanting, "We are staying up, we are staying up," which was the chant you say when you avoided relegation.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
So they've won the league by 10 points and they're chanting, "We're staying up, we're staying up."
That's great. Yeah, that's
pretty
an
good.
understatement. That's English humour for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Your Leicester City, is that what you said?
Yeah.
What are their colours?
They're blue and white. They're darker blue than this.
I'll have to look that up
Yeah.
a little bit later on.
Yeah.
I was going to say as well, I was quite surprised how full on the game was the second the whistle blew. Like, I saw a guy shoving another guy within like seconds of the game starting. I know you're not allowed to... Are you allowed to touch the other players?
Yeah,
They kind of
you
do,
are.
though, don't they?
You are. There's and so it's the degree of contact that's the question.
Was that a goal?
Often, no,
looks
just
like it bounced
missed,
out.
curved wide. De Bruyne, with his left foot from 25. That's the referee's discretion a little bit. You're officially allowed to go shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
But then there's also whether you're within playing distance of the ball.
Oh, yeah, so you can't just
have you
shove
got
someone.
sort of notional possession of the ball? Have you got a right to it? There's that, and then there's just the straight out physicality. But you could do a very slight touch and trip someone up.
Yeah.
And that could be a yellow card because you've stopped them scoring a goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do the cards work? 2 yellow cards and you're off, and 1 red card and you're off?
That's right. Yeah.
Do they happen quite a bit, or are they fairly rare?
No, it happens quite a lot. You would, what do you reckon? Probably, I don't know, it could be like 10% of games. Oh, no, less. 5 to 10% of games you'd have someone sent off.
That's pretty low compared to what I see in rugby. It seems like someone's always getting sent off in rugby.
Well, they just have sin bins. They
Oh,
only go
okay.
off for 10 minutes.
Oh, so it's just like a
yeah,
little...
if they go off here, they go off forever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a permanent
and
thing. You're
they
done
miss
for
the
the
next
day.
game as well. Yeah.
Can they go home if that happens?
No, but they...
Imagine some football player just wants an early night, so he
Yeah.
just shoves the guy.
Oh, well, there was this thing with tactical yellow cards because yellow cards can accrue, and then, like, if you had a certain amount, then you'd miss the next match.
Oh, I see.
So if someone was in jeopardy of missing, a big match, they might take a yellow card, deliberately get a yellow card to clear the yellow cards before the big match.
Oh,
But
that makes sense.
Anyway, there's a
yeah.
little bit
That's fascinating. I was going to say as well, the... Oh, geez, it was something to do with yellow cards. I was going to say as well, the average age of the players is quite young because they're talking about this character in Ted Lasso called Roy Kent, and they talk to him like he's ancient, but he's like 35 or something like that. Is that considered old for something
Yeah, that's age is increasing. Age is increasing.
Yeah.
Ibrahimovic has been playing top level stuff into his early 40s, but that is. They take much better care of themselves now. All the sports science, and there's so much money and attention to it. You just the recovery.
Yeah.
You're monitored so much more than there was a. People used to smoke and drink before, like
Yeah.
Socrates, who ran the Brazilian midfield in the early.
Is that really his name, Socrates?
Yeah,
That's brilliant.
Well, he was a doctor,
Nice.
but he chain smoked.
Yeah, well,
and
a lot of doctors used to do that.
yeah,
didn't
that's
they?
right. Yeah, well, it's very slimming.
Yeah, it's got a smooth pull.
Yeah, so they didn't, and
I love that.
You
You used to watch like the Chicago Bulls in the middle of the like halftime, whatever, they'd be puffing on cigars and stuff in
Right.
between the games.
yeah,
But so sorry I interrupted you. They're taking a bit of care of themselves.
yeah,
now.
and so they've got all this, and so they can extend their productive playing stuff, and so. Arsenal's a very young team, actually. They're the youngest in the Premier League, and they've done pretty well. They're still, I think their average age might be into the early 20s.
Oh yeah,
which is pretty young, because you tend to need players still peaking in their mid to late 20s.
Yeah,
really.
gotcha. Yeah. I was going to say as well, with the idea of having like a star player, like, is that something that was actually David Beckham, was he all he was cracked up to be, or was that just kind of a
he was very good. Despite all the showbiz stuff, he trained the house down.
Yeah,
he was really diligent. He was just
a
top professional.
Yeah.
And he kept himself fit, and so he was just really dedicated. And he was very good at a few things. He wasn't the player that was going to transform a whole team. He would add to a team at a high level, but he wasn't like Maradona or Messi that could actually take a whole team and lift it several notches.
So you could do that with a really good player. They could lift.
Yeah, well, that's why Maradona is rated by many as better than Pele, because Pele, it was a different era. I have a lot of respect for Pele, but Maradona took a whole team to win the World Cup.
Right.
And you could have taken any one of those players out of the team and he would still would have won, but not Maradona.
Yeah, okay.
Because he's doing so many things for the team.
Gotcha. in the sort of flip side of that, could a team? I'm guessing yes is the answer to this, but is there a team that doesn't really have any standouts, but they're all just so solid that they are able to stand up to a team with a Messi or something on it, like a star player?
Yeah, they'll do that. And that's often comes down to quite a really rigid system.
Right.
There's only so far those teams can go.
Yeah.
Because it's all about the collective, and they can do quite a lot, but if you come up a team that can do all that but also have players that can change it up, that's the difference.
I remember talking to a friend of mine about we just seen the movie Moneyball. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
So
there was a couple of clubs that are kind of Moneyball-ish.
Moneyball.
They're doing well.
Nice.
Brentford and Brighton.
What is the metric they use? Because Moneyball was get on base. What is the metric they'd use for football?
I don't know. I think there's quite a lot to it.
Yeah.
But they get their recruitment really good. They don't often miss out on recruitment. But I think
that was a big tackle there.
So they have a plan for who they want, what the team needs.
Yeah.
They have a team. They have a team plan that kind of overrides any particular manager.
Gotcha.
So the manager will come into the team plan.
Yeah.
The recruiting will be for the team plan, and then you can. There's so many great players around the world.
Yeah.
You just need to be able to find them. And identify, can they step up that level?
Yeah, I got you.
And as long as you've got the support in place, the experience in the league, they'll adjust.
Yeah.
Initially, they'll be crap. You just give them some minutes here and there.
Yeah.
But eventually, they adjust, and then they become a Premier League player.
Gotcha. I think the UFC have been doing this a little bit lately, and Dana White had this TV series where he would go to Africa and Russia and all these other countries, and he would watch amateur MMA fights, and he would try and bring them to the UFC. So we're kind of globalized as a world now. So if you can see these players, one other thing I was going to ask you as well, what is the structure of a team? So you have all the players, and then you have a coach and a manager, and they're separate people.
You have trainers that might assist, and this is different in different places. So more recently, clubs have had a director of football, that one responsible for the overall planning. When it comes to recruitment, it might be the manager and the director of football and some others who decide whether they're going to recruit a player or not.
Gotcha.
You've got trainers are more low level running sessions according to what the manager wants.
Yeah.
The manager is like another name for the coach in English football.
Gotcha.
And then you've got the medical staff.
So the manager is sort of a general, they decide on what the team is going to do and what the team needs. Is that
so in English football they've been very powerful. The pinnacle was that with Fergie. And post Fergie, other clubs have been trying to get away from the all powerful manager and put a little bit more sort of long term planning structure,
a system rather than a person in place. But
still, the manager in English football would have a decisive say on recruitment generally.
Yeah.
They would decide how they're going to train. They would decide who to sell. Mm-hmm. They would decide who to play, and they would decide on the tactics.
Do you ever get trades in British football?
They don't tend to be trades. They tend to be just selling or buying.
Right.
Yeah.
I always found that funny how in American baseball and stuff like that, they can just you just have to move to Boston now, and but I mean, I guess it's part of, they sign up, they know what they're signing up for. So yeah. You were telling me something else quite interesting about it before, about the idea of merchandising, and you were telling me about they wanted to make a world league where everyone could just play everyone at all times to try and get in. Because what were you telling me? Something.
Well, it was more just to So in European football, which is basically in all football, really it's just non-American setup. It's not the franchise system. It's a community-based club that's grown up out of the grassroots, and it will be playing in a pyramid type league where there's promotion and relegation. So there's jeopardy. You can go up or down.
Yeah.
But the big clubs that are, they're in those leagues habitually, but they're saying, well, we need more money, and the way to get more money is if we play other big clubs, and really we would attract way more money if we just had like a super league.
Yeah.
And that's what they called it. They called it the Super League, and it was a bunch of clubs got together and said, we don't need to do UEFA's Champions League. We can make up our own league, and we can get way more money, and we can keep it ourselves. And that was the plan, but it got shot down. But it will come again because the money is compelling.
Interesting. I was going to say, how do the teams tend to make money? Do they win money if they win games?
Well, you come into financial fair play here, because not for a long time clubs weren't really in it to make money.
Oh, okay.
They were there to win, and you'd have a local businessman director who would sort of put some money in to sort of make sure it worked. But it was about the success.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got the big money came in with TV, and which was more money you could spend on getting a great team.
Yeah.
So then that raised the level. So then you got more like billionaires coming in saying, look, if I threw $1 billion at this, I could get a really successful team, and then the club becomes more successful, more valuable.
Yeah.
But then the administrators said, we need to stop this. We need a cap on it, and their cap was the notion of financial fair play.
I was going to ask if there's a salary cap for these kind of
so
things.
there's no salary cap, except you're supposed to not spend. You're supposed to spend a proportion of your football generated income. So your football generated income is your sponsorship, your advertising, your profits on player transfers, and your gate receipts. And your TV income.
Oh, so they get to keep the money from the tickets they sell to their home games?
Well, and they give a proportion of their home gate to the away team as well.
Oh, okay.
That's all. I don't know the exact proportion.
Yeah, that's how it works.
There's the sponsorship. You can make a profit or loss on selling a player. You've got the TV revenue.
So it's like flipping a house. You buy a player really cheap, you build them up a bit, and then you sell them.
That's how Leicester survived. They've sold one of their best players each year just to be able to buy and buy a few average players and maybe sell them on.
Oh, I love that.
So there's definitely that.
I love it.
But what they're trying to get away from is someone just throwing so much more money at it than is football related.
Yeah.
And so then what Manchester City did, they said, well, we've got all this money, but we haven't got that much football-related money. So what we'll do is we'll get Etihad Airlines to sponsor us like £100 million for, like just over the top.
I see.
And so then there's still question marks whether what they've done is legal or not. People are trying to take them to court and say, no, you breached financial fair play.
It's funny how that works, because I was talking to someone who's on a community radio station, and they said because they're I think it was a non-profit or something, they're only allowed to make a certain amount of money through ad sales, but sponsorship doesn't count towards that. So anything they can sponsor, that's just like whatever it's on top of. And so, I don't know, maybe it's the same as what they're doing here.
Well, it's the football-related income is the catchphrase sort of thing.
Yeah. Is that one of those things where people try to bend it a little bit because football-related could be quite a relative term depending on who you ask?
There's a lot of bookkeeping shenanigans going on. Yeah.
I was going to ask as well, I think this has turned more onto a business behind the football. We haven't talked a lot. We talked a little bit about football, but I don't know. I just find all this stuff fascinating. So I hope you don't mind talking about the business behind it. each team has their own stadium or their own grounds?
They will. But sometimes they're community owned. They might just be leasing them.
Gotcha.
Sometimes they'll own them, or they'll leverage the hilt.
Yeah.
That's another thing of to tweak the financial fair play. Or you sell your stadium and you lease it back, or
I see. So it's like, no, we're just renting our own.
Yeah.
Interesting. That must be an interesting job to be bookkeeper for a big because I presume it'd have to be publicly available information.
Well, the interesting one with Everton, one of the oldest and successful clubs in English football, it's the other Liverpool team.
Yeah.
Their accounts have been tagged this year.
Oh.
Because they've spent a whole lot of money, but they're still in jeopardy of being relegated. and the accountants have said, if this team is relegated, we can't be sure it's a going concern, because the financial implications of being relegated, coupled with their current financial position, would make it very hard for them to continue to exist.
That's so. Are they trying to be like oh, come on, don't cut us. We're going to disappear if you do, kind of thing?
Oh no! If they finish in the bottom, they're out.
Yeah.
And the bottom three, they're out. There's no pleading your case.
Okay, so you can't,
they're gone.
You can't plead your case.
No.
Come on, bud. We had it.
Not to the other team. They say, well, if you're not going, who is? We're not going.
Because that was I'm not sure if we recorded it, but they cut the bottom three teams in the Premier League, and then does that mean that three teams from the Championship League come up?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So there's sort of like a revolving door of teams in and out of the leagues. That's cool. It keeps it fresh.
Yeah, and there's teams that tend to be in the top half of the Premier League because they're big and they've got the money, but sometimes they can slip down into the relegation. And Everton, I think they've only had sort of maybe 1 year out of 100 plus, maybe 1 year out of maybe 130 that they haven't been in the top league.
Right.
They are probably one of the two most successful teams for staying in the top league.
And that was one of the Manchester ones you said?
Liverpool.
Oh, Liverpool.
Yeah.
Is there anything that they do special? Is it just that they're so solid that they're not likely to lose enough games to...
well, they've got a pretty special ground. They've got a really, you've got hardcore fan culture, which can contribute a whole lot. Their home atmosphere is incredible, so that probably has made the difference when maybe they were in jeopardy in the past, and it might make the difference again this year.
Okay.
I want to just on the players here, how far a player can come up to get into Premier League. The thing about football is that there are just
that guy just tackled two people in a row.
Yeah, but they were all good tackles.
So that was legal?
Yeah. No, he got the ball. So if he played the ball first and the other people sort of fell over him, but he had the momentum, that was a good challenge.
Yeah.
If he had kicked them out of the way to get the ball, that would have been a foul.
So to my untrained eyes, it looked like he just swept their legs out from under them and then nobody stopped him.
No, he tackled the ball. The ball was there. He hit the ball hard and went through.
So it's the kind of thing where if you touch the ball first... And then it's like, I guess
that counts for a lot. If you touch the ball first before you hit the man, that counts for a lot. But more recently, there's another thing, because it used to be so hectic. Like in the old days, they just used to kick the most talented players. Like if you see the treatment that Maradona used to get, they just used to hack him down because he'd just keep beating them.
They used to do it to Jordan as well, from what I hear.
Right. Yeah. So now. It's a lot tougher, and there's you could make a challenge where you get the ball first, but you clean out the man, and it will still be a foul because you've taken an unreasonable risk.
Right. So they have
players' safety. You could still So there's that aspect.
They're kind of doing that with the UFC. There's certain rules that they like kicking in the groin or something like that. Is if you think about it. The idea of if you want to know who's the best fighter in the world, you would want to allow everything, headbutts, scratching the eyes, etc. But for the health of the fighters, you know, we can't have them gouging each other's eyes out and kicking each other in the groin and whatever. So, like, I guess it comes back to the whole that they're trying to look after the players and get, I guess it feeds back for them as well, because the longer a player can go, the better it is for the sport, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. But it's good for the sport if the top players play more.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this guy on the ground now is getting checked on by the doctor.
Yeah, he's had a bit of an injury. There's a little thing here, because once the ref says the medical people can come on and look at this person, so there's an intrinsic delay here, and sometimes there'd be tactical delays. So what the rule now is that if the doctor comes on to look at you, then you must leave the field with the doctor before you can come on, and you have to wait for the ref to say you can come back, because otherwise, in the old days, they'd just soak up time here. We're under pressure. Oh, I've got a foul. Have you? Well, are you really injured? How can we tell? And then they would just get up again and start playing. So now they've added a jeopardy. Say, well, if you say you've been injured, you're going to go off and take some time on the sideline, and your team's going to be with one man short for a little bit. So
that we just saw it in slow motion. It looked like he was grabbing his leg as he fell down. Does that look like a legit injury to you? Because he's going.
That looked like he may. It was either wasn't looking that close. It was either a knee to the back, but it looked a little bit like a hamstring pull.
Yeah, he was clutching his kind of like the side and the back of his leg.
It looks like, but I'm not sure whether he's going.
He's walking okay.
Or not. Yeah, it might have just been a knee, a little impact. Don't know. We'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
What I was going to say about the ability for players. So you see all these players here, and it looks all this pace. If you saw an average player in here, you'd see how much slower other stuff is.
I've heard they should do that with the Olympics, just put a normal person on the races to see.
Yeah.
Because you always hear people talking at the pub and stuff about, like, oh, fucking idiot, I would have done that. And it's like, you wouldn't have even been able to keep up with these guys.
You wouldn't get a touch. You could be standing on the field for 90 minutes. You wouldn't even touch the ball.
Exactly.
Because you would be you're just on the Olympics.
Yes.
With having the World Cup recently, I have one beef that the New Zealand media, well, it's not, I have many beefs, but
particular beef.
The particular one was the New Zealand media keeping on calling it the Football World Cup. Like, they don't call it the able-bodied Olympics, right? It's just the Olympics.
So they should be calling it the World Cup.
Yeah, everything else is the special World Cup, the Rugby World Cup, whatever else. This is the original World Cup. It's the biggest sport in the world.
Yeah.
It's just the World Cup. We don't need to call it the Football World Cup like it's some diminutive.
Yeah. I guess at least they weren't calling it the Soccer World Cup.
That's true.
That would be. This progress takes time.
Yeah, but this is getting a little bit my New Zealand slant here. So, these players, every one of them will have been playing football
since they were like 5 or something. Right?
Yeah. Because if you haven't been, there's no way you can play to this level.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole spatial awareness. There's so many different things. Like, when the ball comes to you, there's infinite things you could be doing with that ball.
Mm-hmm.
Compare that with rugby. You're in a back line, the ball comes to you, there's kind of like about 3 things you could do. You could hold the ball and run into the other person. You could kick it over the top. You could pass to the next person. There's just too many variables for you to be arriving at football in your teens and have to think of that. If it's not already embedded, you can't do it. So there's no professional footballer who wasn't playing football at the age of 10.
Really?
There's plenty of rugby players who didn't start playing till they were teenagers because it's so simple. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that people in New Zealand, they don't realise it's a way harder to be in all white than it is in all black.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like it's statistically it's twice as hard because there's more people playing football and there's less all white positions, right?
Are there more people playing football in New Zealand than rugby?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like I know a lot of people don't realise that, but it is. And there's less positions because there's only 11 or 15, but also the all whites don't play that often.
Yeah.
There's so many All Blacks and there's so few people actually playing rugby.
Yeah.
So there's that. there's the fact that if they weren't playing football from the age of 8 or 9, they've got no chance of making the All Whites because you just forget it. You just haven't got it in there. You can go so far, but you won't get there. Then the other thing is that you can't. There's no conveyor belt. So for the All Blacks, you're not allowed to leave the country. You have to. If you leave the country, you can't play for the All Blacks. Well, they might have changed that rule, but it was the rule for quite a while to keep people. So basically, you just needed to be the best 1 or 2 players in your team, every team you play for, and eventually you'll end up in the rep team, Canterbury team, the All Blacks. That's all you need to do. You just need to be the best player in your team.
So there's like a system to get there.
Yeah, it's just a conveyor belt.
Yes, okay.
Football is the opposite. You couldn't you couldn't play for the All Whites if you hadn't gone overseas to compete with people who didn't want you taking their places, to advance yourself to be good enough to be able to play for the All Whites. That's how hard it is, and yet we, you know,
they're not on the Weet-Bix box.
Yeah, it's all the All Blacks, and they've done nothing compared to the All Whites in terms of getting there.
If you were a young football player in New Zealand and you wanted to go on an overseas trip, how long would you go for to play before you? So let's say you started when you were 8.
Yeah.
Played through. When would they leave?
They've got pathways now that weren't before. So you're getting better coaching in the academies here. So if you get to the age of 16, 17, you've had some pretty good coaching now in New Zealand. Then what a lot of them would do is get into the United States college system, because then they can train full time.
So you would apply to a United States university
you send a video clip of how good you are, and you could get a scholarship to the United States. So that's Ryan Nelson did that.
Yeah,
it was he was kind of in that first thing where it was after my time. So he got a degree from Stanford, and he got professional football training.
Wow.
And then from there he was able to jump into American professional football leagues, and from there he jumped across to the English professional football league. But Ryan Nelson, one of our most successful players, you need to recognise him as being a third generation footballer as well.
Right.
You can't do it in one generation. So his uncles were some of the best footballers. They played for New Zealand. And so he had football in his culture.
No kidding.
Maradona's father didn't play rugby. You can't do it in one generation. You have to have you have to have sort of the culture of it.
Yeah. It's a little bit like I trained in Muay Thai, which is Thai kickboxing, and you see the throwing the round kick. You would think is something you could learn at any age. Unless, it's the same as well. Unless you've been throwing that round kick from when you were 5 years old, and most people that I know that are really good at Muay Thai have been learning. Their father taught them when they were a kid, and they just keep going up until their adulthood. And it's just the fluidity of how naturally they throw the round kick compared to when I was kickboxing here. All of us straining and trying to pivot right, and your legs still stiff, and you just see the whip.
Your foot might end up at the same place, but the arc it's travelled and the power
it looks so much nicer when Thai people have been doing it for their whole life. It is, like you say, unless you start early enough, I don't think you. And you watch the footwork in certain MMA fighters is super clunky, and they just stomp around the ring flat-footed, and they're trying to throw their round kicks, and I think a lot of them come from wrestling, and I think it's the same thing wrestling. Unless you wrestled when you were 10, whatever the age they start wrestling in school. And if you look at a lot of the UFC fighters who are doing well, it's all from this Greco-Roman wrestling, and it's all from they've been training since they were 10, something like that. And it's all, like you say, it's all just in your...
You can't do it with brute strength.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be... It's almost like you have to change the way your synapses in your brain function. Because I guess if you... I was going to ask this as well. Let's say you are a midfielder in football, and you've been playing since you were 8. Do you think you could change position and learn how to play as a defender or a striker?
Well, you can. That's what Pep does. Players will shift positions. midfielders are more generalist in what they can do, because they are defending and they are attacking as well, and they have the most difficult sort of spatial thing. But the spatial awareness is different in different positions, so it takes a while to adjust to how you play centre back, in terms of you're often much more aware about your position on the field rather than maybe where the ball and the player is. So you're so that they're different, but you would adjust.
Gotcha. So okay. Well, we're basically coming up on about an hour there. This has been a really fascinating chat. Do you want to plug your latest venture before we go? Your store and your oat milk.
Yeah, Sarah Oat Milk will be in the shops soon. We've been a
How do you spell that?
lot of twists and turns. Well, I think I'm going to put it under the Sarah name, Serra. Currently, I've got an oat dairy one out, but I'm actually pretty happy with the oat one.
Nice.
And surprisingly, it's an easier sell.
Awesome.
Hopefully in the shops soon.
And where can people find your shop?
The cafe, Veg and Friends, corner of Lincoln Road and Parr Lane Street. Yeah.
Jimmy, very good friend of mine. I recommend you go and support his cafe and his Sarah Oat Milk. You can also find him. You've got a comedian page, facebook.com/BigJimmySmall. But I think that's about all the social media you have, isn't it?
Yes, I wouldn't have done anything active on that
2020,
for a while
I think,
either.
was the last post. It was the show at the old little Andromeda. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Jim. I really enjoyed chatting to you.
Thanks, Taylor.
And we're back. Hope you enjoyed that interview. I sure as hell enjoyed having it, and I definitely want to get Jimmy to come back and talk more football sometime in the future. I'm also interested in talking other sports like rugby, basketball, even baseball. I loved Moneyball. So if you'd consider yourself an expert on any of these topics and you're keen to come on the podcast and teach me about it, send me a DM on my Facebook page, Taylor Ruddle Comedy. One more thing before I let you go. I'm starting a new segment of this podcast called Ruddle's Phantom Files, or Phantom Files for short. I'm a huge fan of cryptids, ghosts, UFOs, and all that spooky stuff. So I wanted to create a segment to this podcast where the listeners can send in their own creepy stories, and I'll play them on the podcast. As I've recently learned over the last couple of days, we have a quite active paranormal community here in New Zealand. So I'm absolutely sure there's some great stories out there. And to me, the best thing is listening to them in people's own words. So if you've got a 5 to 10 minute spooky story that you would like me to play on the podcast, send me an email to ruddlesphantomfiles@gmail.com. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. The easiest thing you can do is record it as a voice note on your cell phone and then simply email that to me and I will take care of the rest. Aside from that, as always, give me a follow on all of the social media platforms except Twitter if you want to keep up with what gigs I've got coming up. They are all under @Taylor Ruddle Comedy. At this point, I cannot remember which ones we have announced and which ones we have still to announce, so if you want the most up-to-date information, follow me on Facebook, as that's where most of the event pages will be. We've got some really exciting stuff coming up, some cool new venues we're going to play. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope the rest of your week goes well, and thank you so much for listening. Ruddler out.
Posters, it's a poster podcast. Within Riddle Me This.